Burnout is real, Charles. A bunch of leaders actually experience burnout, and they have in their minds that it's normal. I mean, being
hmm
burnout is a normal. It's kind of like just a part of the job. Is that? Would you say that's
Right.
true for an executive leader?
Yes, yes, yes. Definitely. There's definitely this air or this idea that, well, that's what it takes. That's what's expected is this constant state of stress and anxiety. I think the misconception that you and I are going to straighten out today is the conversation about what burnout actually looks like. Because most leaders think, I'm not burned out because I haven't crashed. I still get up and go to work every day and I'm still functioning. Therefore, I'm not burnt out. And that's the greatest misconception surrounding executive burnout. Because what executive burnout looks like is just a complete numbness, right? And an absolute just survival mode. That's what executive burnout looks like.
Can we get personal really quick? Have you
Mm.
personally ever experienced burnout?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, this is a little bit of a paradigm shift from my perspective on how I experience that. I've never experienced burnout from too much work. I've never experienced burnout from 16 or 18-hour days. Okay. I'm not going to list my resume, but I worked hard my whole life in those kind of contexts. I've never experienced burnout from that. I have, however, experienced burnout when I've been in environments where the mission, the vision, the values, the expectations didn't align with my personal goals and my personal successes. That's where the burnout came. It came from being undervalued. It came from being unappreciated. It came from doing stupid work that I did not understand or did not believe was part of my job description. That's where the burnout came from.
Why do you think leaders are oftentimes the last people to admit that they're burning out?
Absolutely. Because there's this air of, we're tougher than everyone else. We're supposed to be the leader. We set the example. Right. And so if you're a leader and you think that it's your job to outwork everyone and get there before everyone and leave after everyone and know everything, that's not, that's not sustainable, nor is that realistic. And frankly, I mean, you and I had a conversation kind of offline a couple of days ago about being the smartest person in the room. And personally, I don't care who I'm leading or what team I'm leading or at what level I'm leading. I don't want to be the smartest person in the room. And I often enter that room assuming that I'm not, that there are subject matter experts who are much better at this or that or this. And my job as a leader isn't necessarily to know everything and do everything. My job as a leader is very different from that. It's putting the right people in the right places to get the right result.
Is there a moment that stands out to you when when you realize that someone was completely just depleted, but they were still performing pretty well?
I mean, there's so many signs. If you know what you're looking for, it is so easy to just pick out. It's like it's like you're highlighted. That's how easy it is to pick out burned out people in a crowd, because there's physical, there's emotional, there's intellectual signs on every level. And if you frame it from the perspective that I just presented it as, which is somebody who's misaligned, like most burnout for me from executives, the solution isn't take a vacation, take a couple of days off, get some rest. Because again, it's not a physical thing. It's not because you're working too hard. It's because you're working too hard on the wrong things. You've seen me work 18 hours a day on this coaching practice and still have energy to do more and still have ideas. And we're like, okay, that's it. Get off Slack, go to bed, right? Enough is enough. Why is it that I don't burn out around this? Because it
Because you enjoy
motivates
it.
me, because I enjoy the crap out of it, because it's so perfectly aligned to who I am as a person that everything I do is kind of a momentum builder. It's an upward spiral, which is why there's people in corporate positions and private positions, maybe they own their own business, maybe it doesn't matter, who never seem to run out of enthusiasm or energy for their job or for their position. And it's because of that alignment. It's not because their job is easier. It's not because there's less work involved. It's because they're more aligned to who they are. They have intrinsic motivators in there that just internally fuel that fire over and over and over.
Uh, it, to me, it feels like burning out and just burnout in general isn't really spoken about that much at an executive level. Like I see a lot of employees and teammates talking about, oh my God, I'm just tired. I do need that 2 week vacation, something like that. But at the, executive level, I feel like the burnout process isn't really spoken about that much. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, you got to think about this. Let's just take, XYZ Corporation, and there's the CEO, and then maybe there's, three or four chief positions: chief operating, chief marketing, chief finance, something like that, right? It gets very narrow at the top, is what I'm getting at. And so there's a threshold in every organization where when you cross over that threshold, it's now a foot race to that top position. You get to a point in your career where you're like, you know what? I I actually might be able to I actually might be able to be CEO. I might be able to do that. And so within that threshold, a couple of things happen. First of all, you can have we can have a morality question another time, but first of all, you cross that threshold and your job becomes your master status. It becomes your primary identity because those roles require a 24/7 focus. If you're responsible for thousands of jobs and hundreds of millions of dollars, you don't work a 9 to 5. You don't work 40 hours a week. It's just there's too many demands. Because, like I said, it gets pretty narrow at the top. There's only a few people who can make those certain decisions. So if you have hundreds of decisions to be made every day and they're divided amongst three or four people, there's a lot of just a huge volume of work to be done. So first of all, you get acclimated to that. And that's part of the indoctrination into the executive suite is, are you willing and are you able and are you ready to make this sacrifice where this job becomes, 51% of your life, if not more? And
Which
people who
means
raise their hands and say yes,
it oftentimes leads to them to believe that they don't have the right to complain or they don't have the right to speak up and say, hey, I'm not aligned with what
right,
I'm doing.
right. This is what it takes. And again, ooh, it's so close. Like the big chair is so close. It's just within reach, right? And you're not competing with dozens and dozens of people. You're literally to a spot where you're competing with 6 or 8 people. Man, you start to really weigh and measure yourself in a very specific way. And so there's plenty of organizations out there where the CEO themselves is like, yeah, no. I'm not doing that. Like, I'm not working 24/7 for this company. I think it's a wonderful company. I started it, I grew it. It's a wonderful place, but I'm not going to live like that. And therefore, that culture and that attitude bleeds down. And you have a very relaxed, very fulfilled organization as long as it stays private, right? But anyway, so there is absolutely an opportunity, and there's plenty of examples of companies out there whose top executive leadership are like, hey, listen, there's more to life than just this company. Okay, then that's part of the company's values. That's part of the company's mission, which is, hey, we have lives outside of this job. Like, take a sabbatical, take your break, do things for your family. We'll handle this. It's more of a team kind of structure. That the way I've observed it, it's more of a team structure. We back each other up so that everybody stays healthy. But that's got to come from the top.
Right. I don't know, man. I feel like high performing, um, I was going to say managers. One of the things that I'm getting out of these conversations with you is that I tend to not like to use the word manager anymore. I like to refer to people as leaders if they truly are leaders.
Right.
And I feel like high performing leaders oftentimes just confuse burning out with pushing through ultimately.
Yeah, because they're incredibly high functioning, right? So that's the catch, and that's the trap of being high functioning and a high peak performer. Is you have been reinforced most likely your entire life and rewarded for being high functioning. So you tie a lot of your identity into that. What does it say about me if I step away from this position and go on vacation? It's not my position to judge what you think your identity is. And if your identity is, I've always wanted to be a CEO, I've always wanted to run a company, that is your identity to create and to own. I'm not going to judge that. There is no moral high ground above what we believe our own identity is. Nobody gets to tell you what that is. Um, However, those of us who experience burnout, it's typically because our identity isn't fully realized just in our job or just in that one title. We want to be other things as well. Call to be a parent. It's a very strong call within a lot of people. Yeah. I want to have a great career, but always wanted to be a dad. I remember being really, really young and thinking about what it would be like to be a dad. Like,
Hmm.
that's crazy, right? So that's got to factor into my identity, into my professional identity.
So you would say that these high performers that are constantly thinking about pushing through and making the most out of their careers and their jobs, and you think it's more of like a a question of what are those individuals' aspirations, and not so much about the culture of the organization that they work in.
I think what gets created is a perfect storm, right? You have someone who has a belief system, and that belief system is they watched mom and dad, or mom or dad, do really well professionally, buy a really nice house, have really nice cars, send me to really nice schools. There's a belief system there, right? And the belief is they got that way from working hard. So if I work hard, I can enjoy the same standard of living. I'm not going to argue that that's a wrong belief, but there was a heck of a lot more to it than that. And especially given that mom and dad, their professional life was in a completely different environment and a completely different landscape than mine. So adjustments need to be made. Okay. But what gets created is a perfect storm where you have the old guard, you have the old system where just I own you. You work for this company and you want that bonus and you want that title, then I own you. Your entire life is mine and it belongs to the company. You have that kind of leadership that's still out there. And then you have these people who have that set of beliefs who are like, yeah, I understand. I get that. I get that. Yep. That's what I'm looking for. And that's why I work so hard through high school and college and my internships or whatever to get here, because I believe that too. So that perpetuates that stereotype and it perpetuates that model. But so what you end up with is this identity plus this pressure plus this component of isolation where those individuals reinforce themselves and they get confirmation bias because they're all like that and they work for someone who believes that. And so that's the that's the framework that you get within an organization.
Are there any early signs that people can spot? They may start thinking, "Hey, I'm starting to cross that line of getting burned out, and I want to stop it before it gets real bad."
Yeah, I noticed it for myself the first time I was in an upper management. I know we're splitting hairs here, but an upper management role where I first had direct reports, and the next step was going to be executive, and I watched my executive leader, and I really had to decide. And this is hopefully we all have this opportunity to do this. Is that the life that I want? And I would wake up in the morning and get emails from that individual that were timestamped at 4 a.m. And I would, get emails from them that were timestamped 11:30, 2 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. It's like, okay, wait a minute. Don't ignore that. Like, is that what I want? Because that's the next step for me, at least within this organization. If I stay with this organization and I take my boss's job, it's very clear to me that these are the expectations. Is that an individual who's doing that outside of what the rest of the organization is doing? Could it have just been that my boss was an outlier and was just doing that because maybe he just wasn't good at his job and it took him,
A
18
little
hours a day
extra
to do his
effort.
job? Maybe. But look around, look at the organization, because I don't care what's on the poster and what's written on the wall. Pay attention to what is demonstrated. And if what's demonstrated is I'm going to give you zero notice. I expect you to be up at 5 a.m. We're having this meeting now. We're staying until midnight to do this because this is the most important thing in the world. There's a few things that I would glean from that. But firstly, you really have to ask yourself, look at your boss's life and role and job duties and ask yourself, is that what I want?
Charles, can someone do all of that your boss did and be a dad and stay fit and have a fulfilling life?
Um, it didn't work. It didn't work out so hot for him. His marriage was challenged, and to my knowledge, that marriage ended. I don't know what his relationship was like with his children, but I do know that he was completely burned out. The man was gray, like his skin was gray. He was exhausted all the time, and all I ever saw him eat was Tums and coffee. That's a horrible generalization, right? But truthfully, I projected myself into that position and said, is that the kind of stress and is that the kind of life that I want? There's a whole nother dimension to that as well, which is, what does he do day to day? Like, what are the activities that he does day to day? And this is where I think burnout has a lot more to do with alignment than it does with just volume and capacity of work.
Because you can, as you said, you can spend a lot of time working in things that you do enjoy doing, and therefore you won't experience that sort of burnout. So it's not
Right.
so much about how many hours are you putting into the work. It's more about, are you actually enjoying what you're doing?
Right, right, right. And again, there's certain activities that are inherent to a specific job description. Okay, this is part of your job, man. You got to go to this meeting. You got to do this thing. I don't love it, but look at proportionally. Look at it. Is 80% of your job filled with those types of tasks, and you endure those 80% of those tasks so that you can actually get to do the 20% that you really enjoy and that really lights you up and really motivates you and really excites you? Oh man, that's a horrible ratio in my mind. I like it the other way, right? I mean, I'm not going to lie, as a business owner, 20% of what I have to do, I don't enjoy doing, but I know it's necessary to keep the business running.
And
What's
let's keep
important
it.
to me. Mhm.
I was going to say, let's keep it real. Every job, or every sort of managerial role is, or leadership role, is going to come with some sort of activities that we're not going to like. Like, that's part of
Absolutely.
life, I would imagine.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So one of the things that I can affect for an executive, they come and say, all right, I listen to you, I hear you. Yeah, I'm misaligned. I'm really out of balance. I don't think there's anything I can do about it. I didn't write my job description. I don't get to choose what I do. Do you? Because that's the first challenge, is what are you doing? And you and I have had this conversation. I know you've heard me say this before, but the first thing I'll have anyone in that position do is say, okay, here's what I want you to do just for a day. Just have a pad just off to the side and just kind of write down what you do during the day. Timestamps would be great. It's not really necessary. Hey, I did this, sent these emails, read this, gave this approval, filled out this form, blah, blah, blah. Just do that for a day. Okay. And then on the right hand side of that paper, make two columns. And one column is labeled 20, the next column is labeled 200, and the third column is labeled 2000. Arguably, if you are an executive, if you're in a leadership role, regardless of title, the majority of your work ought to be in that $2,000 an hour column. You are a thought leader. You are a strategist. Your little decisions have $2,000 impacts. And what I find with these leaders and executives who are complaining about burnout is their activities are all over that $20 an hour and $200 an hour columns. They're doing busy work that they should not be doing.
So let's say that you've identified, let's say I'm an executive and I do what you just described that I should do. And I identify a bunch of things that are sitting in that $20 column. What are the next steps for me
Yep.
to start prioritizing some more important work, or to try to align my work into things that are a little bit more meaningful?
Yeah. There's most likely there's one of those little self-limiting beliefs snuck in there. And it made you believe that your value to the organization is the volume of work that you do.
Hmm.
So you filled up your day with $20 an hour tasks to look busy and to keep busy. Executives, leaders who have a reluctance or resistance to delegate or outsource are worried that if I'm not super busy all the time, then I'm not super valuable. And if I'm not super valuable, I'm never going to get that promotion. Holy crap. Like, we'll unpack that for a month because there's so many misaligned beliefs and so many mistruths in that. If you're in a position as a leadership, your job is strategy. And like I said, putting the right people in the right places to do the right things. That's your job. And if you're spending all your time writing emails and doing little things because, oh my gosh, I'm so busy. I'm the busiest person here. They really ought to pick me to be CEO. Dude, you're not ready to be CEO. Like, you would blow up. You would explode because there's a whole bunch more things that you could be messing around with. So
How do
the steps in that are, let's look at those $20. How many of those things that you're doing actually belong to your admin? Are you doing
right.
your admin's job? Are you doing your foreman's job? Are you doing somebody else's job because you think that makes you look smart and makes you look important? Boom. Those are gone. The $200 stuff, $200 an hour stuff, lightly strategic, definitely some knowledge base and some thought leadership in there a little bit. But if you're doing that work, then what are your managers doing? Because your managers arguably should be doing the $200 an hour stuff. So it's typically a combination of not leveraging technology and refusing to delegate and assign the proper tasks to the proper people.
Hmm. What about executives that may think, well, if I start delegating those $200 tasks and those $20 tasks, things are going to fall apart? What if they're genuinely concerned about, their job being crucial to the performance of their team?
Well, that's a genuine concern. And I would say, if you aren't confident that your people can do $20 and $200 an hour tasks, guess whose fault that is?
Right.
100%. That's your fault. And it's likely your fault because you've never given them those tasks to do before. So you've conditioned them to not do those things, and or you've prevented them from learning how to do those things. So that, again, we had that conversation about micromanagement versus leadership. That example that we're giving right there, denying those people the opportunity to learn and to grow and to develop by not delegating and not letting them do the tasks that they're supposed to be doing, that doesn't make you a great leader. That does not guarantee a great outcome and a great result. What it does is it says, oh, I'm sorry, everybody, you're a crappy leader. Because your
Hmm.
job as a leader is, you're supposed to be developing those people. They should be crushing that.
Let's
And they
paint
should
a
be asking for more. Sorry, but those $20 people should be asking for $200 stuff. The $200 people should be asking for $2,000 stuff, or at least starting to understand what that next level of activity and that next level of responsibilities looks like. And you're giving them a chance. Well, you know what? Hey, I'm working on this thing. It's a leadership thing. It's a $2,000 an hour thing. But why don't you give me some ideas about it? Let's work on it together. That's a developmental opportunity. That's
you
you grooming that person for their next opportunity.
you're motivating them.
Yes. Or at least showing them, it's kind of a paid internship, right? Like, if you have aspirations to take my chair and to take my role, let's give it a shot. Like, what do you think? That's what this job is really about. Is this what you like or not? Oh my gosh, no, I don't want anything to do with that stuff. Okay, then you're in the right position and you're in the right role right now. But I've had people that are really, really good, really, really competent, and they've been just so underutilized and so underappreciated for so long. I give them $20 tasks and they chew them up. They
Yeah.
absolutely devour them. And they're like, what's next? What's next? What's next? And it's like, I'm out of $20 stuff. So I'm going to give you a $200 thing. Okay. Ooh, this is a little bit harder. This might take me a little bit longer. Yep. Okay. But they chew on it and they figure it out. And it's like, I need to reassign that person. They're underutilized.
Hmm. Yeah, most of the leaders I've come across, and typically tend to protect their chair and not inspire their employees to try to fill their shoes.
Because you're in a technical field.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, technical fields in particular are especially vulnerable to this kind of mind set and this kind of thinking, which is my value to the organization is my technical acumen.
Hmm.
That's why I'm the chief technical officer, because I was a sick ass coder. No, no. You're the chief technical officer because you understand technology in a way that you're supposed to advise us strategically. Get out of the code. Like, stop it. Your job as a CTO is you should be developing your coders to be better than they are. And you should be able to understand where they would best serve the organization. That's why you're in a chief executive position.
So let me ask you, we've spoken a little bit about what, burning out looks like. Can you show us or paint a picture of what sustainable leadership looks like in contrast?
Oh yeah, no, definitely. So, oh boy, there's the inside out piece, which you have to start there. Ignore your current job descriptions, job duties, all that kind of stuff for just a moment, and do the deep work. Do figure out who you are. Do the values work. Do the needs work. Understand what motivates you, who you always wanted to be. I'm going to bring up purpose, of course, right? You should really understand, what do I believe my purpose is on this planet? And then from that point, that creates your idealized version of yourself and your idealized version of your job. Then you go into assessment phase, which is, okay, now, given that idealized outcome, now let's look at reality. What is the reality of my position? What's the reality of my life right now? Where are the gaps? Where am I doing things that just drain me? Absolutely drain me. Is there a way that I can get those things off my plate? Yes or no? And listen, it took me a couple years. You don't just wake up one morning, sit down, do this exercise once, go in, redraw your job description, and everything's fine. No, no. I had to leave organizations. I had to create positions, and that takes time. It takes a
Hmm.
lot of time to do. Nobody wants to hear that. But if you have a 3-year plan or a 5-year plan, well, what's the basis of that 3-year plan or that 5-year plan? Is it just more, more, more? That's not a plan. That's not a plan. That's externally motivated. That's wrought with errors and obstacles. But if your 3-year plan or your 5-year plan is, I want to get as close to authentic and as close to aligned as possible, so I'm looking for a job or a role that looks like this. Oh my God, now you're talking about a real 3-year or 5-year plan, because that plan is independent of where you work, what your title is, that type of thing.
Have you seen any leaders come out the other side of burning out stronger?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And not only stronger, but inoculated, right? I don't fear burnout at all. I don't care how big my practice gets. I don't care how I am immune to burnout for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I take my self-care and I take my recovery very important. They are 25% of my cycle of recovery and struggle and release and flow. I practice a flow cycle daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually. That's how I live my life. So first and foremost, my health and my well-being are a very high priority to me, because I know that I need that to perform at all. And then with respect to burnout, I'm creating this beautiful, wonderful, incredible, idealized life of my own, one decision at a time, one day at a time. I'm making decisions and choices. And so I don't get tired of this, right? In fact, I annoy the crap out of you every day with yet another idea and another idea and another. Hey, we need this page. We got to do this. Let's create this. Let's build this, right? Where does that come from? Where does that insatiable wellspring of ideas and energy come from? It's because I'm very, very closely aligned to my idealized identity and purpose. That's why. And you can do that. You can craft that. I don't care where you are in your life right now. There is a path from where you are right now to that life.
Is it going to require constant sacrifice?
No, no. What it requires is constant honesty. beginning with being honest with yourself. Many breakthroughs with high achievers and high performers come when they are willing to be honest with themselves and admit, yeah, I never really cared much for the title. It was just expected. And I was told this is some of the most dangerous words in the human language. You have such potential. You have so much potential. You can do anything you want.
Those are dangerous words.
Those are very dangerous words, because then we're constantly chasing this fulfillment of someone's very qualitative assessment of who we should be and who we become.
So
I suffered from that for a long time.
what should someone do when they hear someone tell them, "Hey, you've got a lot of potential"?
Yeah, so thank you. That's nice. People never say that to mess with you. Well, there's some people who would say that to mess with you, and it can be a fun, sarcastic thing to say to the right person. But generally speaking, the people are being sincere, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, like you're so good at everything. Like you just every time you always have your stuff together. You're always so put together. You're always so professional. You're articulate. You're passionate about what you do. You're so smart. Oh my gosh, you have such potential." Okay, thank you. What that could be is not a red flag, but a yellow flag that, if people say I have potential, then our interpretation is I'm not doing everything that I can. Our interpretation and our sick little, low self-esteem minds is, oh, I'm not there yet. I'm not realized yet. I'm not actualized yet because I still have potential. That's why it was dangerous for me, because it didn't matter
Huh.
how good I did. When I did well, it was a reinforcement to that bias that I had potential. Oh, shit. Potential means you're not there yet. Potential means there's a gap between where you are and where you could be. That's how it gets interpreted. So if someone tells you you have potential, they say it to be kind, they say it to be nice, but how it's typically internalized is I'm not doing enough. So
I
again, I'll steer you right back to that internal assessment.
I have never thought about that in that way, and I've fallen victim for this. I can probably think of 5 or 6 people that I've told them, "Hey, I love what you're doing, and I think you've got a lot of potential. What is a different way in which I should probably rephrase that instead of, if I see someone like I've actually said this to a friend of mine probably like 4 days ago. She started creating content on TikTok, and she's blowing up. She's got like 30,000 followers already, and I straight up told her, "Hey, I think you've got potential. What would be a better way for me to say I love what you're doing, and I think you should continue to do it because I think you're going to do great."
That rewind and just say that. Firstly, make a statement, right? Which is, so specificity is king when it comes to feedback. Hey, I think you're great. You're doing great. That feels good for a millisecond. Hey, I saw this video where you said this thing that made me think differently about this. Thank you. Oh, how freaking specific is that? And because of that, it's changed the way that I think about this. And now I'm happier or better off for it. Oh, wow. Antecedent behavior, consequence, holy crap. That's a specific piece of feedback. That's going to give that person something more actionable and something that they really grab onto. And that feedback has a really long half-life, right? They're going to recall that very specific feedback. The other piece of really great feedback, when you see someone with, a lot of potential, and you don't want to necessarily phrase it that way, is be curious. That's what I do. When I see potential in someone, I get curious, right? And I'm like, so what are you working on next? What's your plan for this? What's your trajectory on this? What are you thinking is next? Like, is this what you set out to do? Did you have any idea? Did you expect to get 30,000 followers in, this many days? Like what happened? How do you, right? Ask questions, and that engages them more. Opportunity for you to give specific feedback. Oh, I've seen that work before for this person who did this, right?
Makes perfect sense. So I think to wrap it up, Charles, I want to circle back just to close on this topic of burnout in executives. If I'm an executive and I'm listening to this podcast conversation between you and And I'm feeling a little bit exhausted. I'm starting to feel exhausted, but I think that I need to continue to push through and continue to live this, and in this way, because that's what's going to get me success. What would you tell me?
Oh, yeah. There is such a catch 22 in this burnout cycle because typically it does happen in that place. We get to this place of decision fatigue, and we're really, really trick ourselves into believing if I just get past this, if I just get to Friday, if I just get to the end of the quarter, if we just get over this one project, then everything will be better. Okay, be honest with yourself and recognize, nah, like no, it's not. So if you find yourself approaching, you're feeling that kind of fatigue, the answer there is that you may have to break some eggs in order to make this omelet. Nobody wants to let go of control. Nobody wants to let things fail, especially in the environment that we're talking about, where letting it fail can be traced back to a lack of effort, right? Like if we have this report ready for 7 a.m. tomorrow, then we'll just keep cruising along. But I'm going to have to stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning to finish this report for it to be ready for 7. I get it. I get it. It's a requirement. It's a deliverable. It's due at a specific time. I've got to just push through and finish that. But you know, this is tough because I would never tell someone to neglect their duties or to put their job in jeopardy by just saying my health is more important and walking away. But I'll tell you that if you don't make that decision will be made for you. You will have a heart attack, you will have a stroke, you will have a breakdown of some sort. Your body is going to catch up. The yellow flags happen emotionally and intellectually. The red flags happen physically. Your body and your mind are intrinsically connected, and therefore you can only shoulder so much stress and so much decision fatigue and so much worry before your body says, we're not doing this anymore. We're done.
stress
It
really
will
does
protect you. It will
stress
protect
really
you.
does kill
Yeah.
people, right?
Yeah. So a big part of heading that off at the pass is you've got to be willing to let things break. You've got to be willing to give up some control, and you've got to ask for help. And it's a very vulnerable thing to do, especially in the environment that we're talking about. But you've got to ask for help, either with among your team or reach out to someone external. If you want to maintain a certain level of confidentiality and privacy, reach out to someone like myself and say, I got to figure this out. I got to talk this through. I can't let go. I've got to finish this. My family's counting on me, but I feel like I'm losing my mind.
How can someone reach out to you, Charles?
Best thing to do is visit me at therealcharlesbrown.com. We're pretty active on YouTube and LinkedIn these days, but that's a great place to start. We have a pretty terrific assessment specifically for leaders and peak performers, 2 separate assessments right there that'll help you diagnose where you are on that curve and what your next steps might be.
I absolutely loved this week's conversation, Charles. I think it was really helpful for me too. I thought it was super insightful. Next week, we've got a special video that we're going to be working on. I'm not sure if we could call it a podcast episode. It might just be a video that we
Oh,
post on
yeah.
YouTube. It's going to
Yeah.
be a special one. We've never done this before, but I think that there's going to be a lot of people that are going to learn a lot from it. And it's also going to be engaging, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll get there.
Well,
That's a
I
fun one.
appreciate I appreciate your time, Charles. I'll catch you next week.
All right. Take care.